You've probably heard of that famous Windows God Mode folder, which most people think contains all possible direct links to all the special locations and menus in Windows, but they are wrong. So I created a free script you can use which pulls truly every special link and command stored in the Windows registry and resource files. That's a lot that do not show up in the normal God Mode folder. For example, this new phonetic settings link, which opens up this weird Microsoft Bopo Mofo settings menu, which apparently would normally only show up if you have your language set to Chinese or something. But not only that, this script also fetches literally hundreds more of these so-called shell links, such as shell:startup, which if you didn't know, goes to a special startup folder where everything you put in it starts with Windows. But also more weird ones, like this command folder, which as far as I can tell is some kind of virtual embedded folder that Explorer uses to show user interface elements, and you're definitely not supposed to just be able to open this normally. In total, it will usually gather over 1,000 special links depending on your Windows version and installation. So if that other folder is nicknamed Windows God Mode, then I guess you could call this Super God Mode. Alright, enough yapping, let's actually get to how to run this, and I'll put a link in the description to the GitHub repo where you can download this. Then you can just go to the releases section, which will have the latest version, and download the supergodmode.ps1 file for the latest release. And to run it, normally you'd need to use an extra command, and you can read about that here, or you can just download this launcher batch file that I made along with the script, and that lets you just double click that, and then it will open. And you can see it even has a little GUI for all the options and stuff. Now, don't get overwhelmed. All of these options are purely optional. I'll explain these in more detail later, but you can also just hover over the different settings and it'll show you a little brief explanation. So we can just leave all this alone and run it with the defaults by just hitting run script and then let it do its thing. You'll see in the console window, it'll show what's going on, and it shouldn't take long, maybe a minute or so. And when it's finished, it will show a little summary of how many of each type of shortcut it created. You'll see that it will have created a folder called Super God Mode, and inside it, you'll see a bunch of folders, each with a different type of shortcut, and then one statistics folder with some spreadsheets and stuff with a bunch of extra data if you happen to want it. And there's also a little text file with some extra tips and info if you're interested. Now, quick note, for the names of these folders, I did choose the names of these and the icons, but everything within these is automatically named. So let's take a look inside, starting off with the special named folders shortcuts. And these are the simplest. They're basically all shortcuts to special named locations in Windows, I guess you'd say. So you'll notice in the shortcut paths, if you look at the properties, they don't just have a normal looking path. The shortcuts basically use Explorer to run a shell command, where each name of the shortcut set is the same as the command that opens that folder. So for example, this is not simply a shortcut to see Windows user Joe app data, but rather it runs the command shell app data, which then opens that location. And fun fact, you can actually type each shell command right in the address bar and it will go to them too. So it's not like it has to be a shortcut. And again, the names of all these shortcuts here are simply those special names. And I also coded the script to go and fetch the proper icon for each shortcut if there was one to the resulting folder. All right, next, let's look at these CLSID shell folders. And these are actually more interesting. They don't just go to folder locations. Like some of these are more commands or specific actions, like this show desktop one that hides all open windows. It's basically the same as clicking the bottom right of the taskbar, that thing. Or this shortcut, which starts with like 2559, which apparently doesn't have a name. And this one opens up the start menu search. Or this window switcher shortcut, which toggles this mode. Many of these shortcuts also go to virtual folders, which aren't real folders, but they still use File Explorer as an interface. For example, Recycle Bin. This is not actually a real folder. It's like a virtual one. Or this Applications folder. This one has special links to launch most of the installed applications and tools on the computer. Other shortcuts might open options menus like this Folder Options, which shows this options window for File Explorer, or Taskbar, which opens up the taskbar settings. You will notice that some of these also go to the same location as some of the named folders we looked at before, so some places are accessible via both types. And actually in here, I have a couple that are added manually by me. I used a tool called WinArrowTweaker that lets you add to the navigation bar custom shortcuts, and turns out they show up here too. I will point out that some of these shortcuts are for more behind the scenes type stuff, so they won't actually do anything when you click it, or they might give you an error. That's That's pretty normal. And I did not hard code any of these names, by the way. So these weird ones like delegate folder that appears in users files folder. That's literally what the thing is called in the registry. If you're interested in like what CLSID even is, you can watch my other video where I went in more depth about links in general in Windows. But effectively, CLSIDs are kind of like unique identifiers in the Windows registry. They look like this with these brackets in them. And if you open up all the properties for the shortcuts, you'll notice that they sort of look like the named folder shortcuts, but this time there's shell and then 3 colons and then the CLSID of whatever place it's linked to. So that's why it's a different folder. They're a different type of shortcut. And fun fact, like I mentioned, that God mode folder, that's actually in here too. It's a CLSID link. And like I said, it is actually called all tasks. And like I said, when you go in here, depending on your Windows installation, you might see around 200 of these, and that's not actually all of them. So let's back up and then go to the third folder created by the script, which I called all task links. And here you should be able to see links to all the same stuff as in all tasks, but more of them. Now, because that official all tasks menu or the God mode folder is actually like a special user interface, that you'll notice has some more columns like keywords and stuff like that. I couldn't do that with a regular shortcut folder. So what I did instead to make it still be able to group the shortcuts together is I had it prepend the name of the application or like the menu that it goes to, so at least they're all kind of grouped together if they're related. And I will show you where all these names come from, by the way. It's not actually in the registry. It took some work to find. All right, so you're probably curious which ones of these show up that didn't before. And there's several of them. Here's a few examples, like these language ones, which open up these windows and menus that I've never seen before. For example, settings for Microsoft IME. I've never seen this one before, as well as Microsoft new phonetic settings. I think I showed that one before, never seen this. There's also this shortcut to generate a system health report, which runs the resource monitor and runs that task. There's this command to install a program from a network, which opens this menu. So it's like add or remove programs, but for network. There's also a shortcut to calibrate display color, which wasn't there before, and adjust clear type text too. Now, to be clear, these are not secret menus or secret commands. For a lot of them, you can actually just search the start menu and bring it up. But if you didn't know to search for it in the first place or what it was called, then you wouldn't be able to do that. So that's where this all comes in handy. Now, to be clear, some of these links might not actually work. There could be a reason it was not listed in the all tasks menu. For example, some of these only apply if you're on a laptop, or if you have like a pen, like a lot of these pen and ink ones only show up normally if you have a pen. And others seem to be like leftovers from older versions or just are broken links completely. So yeah, it's everything, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're all useful. But again, there are some that do work, like those language ones. Next, we can look at the system settings shortcuts. And for these, all of them go to specific pages or subpages within the Windows System Settings app. For example, if we click display, that goes to the system display page. And if we do display advanced graphics, that goes to the graphics subpage. Now, if you look at the properties for these shortcuts, you'll notice something strange. The target location says the internet, and that's because these are actually a URL link with the special MS settings protocol. And then the name of the shortcut is literally just the part that goes after the colon here. But interestingly, MS settings is not the only one of these special URL protocols. There's actually many more. So next, we can look in the other folder that is called URL protocols. And in here, if you view the properties of any of them, such as a calculator, you will see that the shortcut actually goes to a URL. But again, instead of HTTP, it here literally just says calculator. And if you click this shortcut, indeed, it opens the Windows calculator. And you can also just type the URL into the run box also. It works that way too. By the way, the 3 slashes just means that it's a local path on the computer, but 2 slashes or even not putting any slashes would still work too. And actually, here's a tip. What you can actually do is add a column in Windows Explorer to link target. You can just find that under the more columns. And after you do add that, the column will literally show the place that all these shortcuts go to. Now, the reason I've not mentioned this before is because unfortunately this column will cut off and not show anything after any spaces in the target path because it considers that an argument and it only shows the target, not any arguments. So like for all the shell shortcuts, it literally just shows the Explorer part of the path, so it's not really useful. But in this folder, it's especially useful. Anyway, now you can see that for all the other shortcuts here, the name of the shortcut is literally just the name of the URL protocol, and there are a lot of them. Now, you might notice that in addition to the MS settings one that we were looking at before, a few of these settings menus actually have their own entire protocol link as well. So for example, you could get to the power settings either with this MS settings power protocol directly or via the MS settings power sleep. Now, how many of these different protocols you'll see will depend on your Windows installation. Some of them are built into Windows and other ones could even be added by software. So if there's some default Microsoft apps that you uninstalled or never installed, they might not show up here. Now, by default, the script will only show protocols that are either from Microsoft or like built into the system. But there is this option to include third-party protocols, and that will add a whole bunch more for other software. For example, if you have like Adobe Reader or something, that'll probably show up. You might also see Steam show up. Just keep in mind that a lot of these might not necessarily work or do anything because these are mostly meant to be behind the scenes stuff. But for the most part, these will usually at least launch the main app associated with them. Next, let's take a look at the deep links folder. Now, what the heck is a deep link? That's just what they're called behind the scenes in the file that they're listed in. I'll explain the technicals later. But basically, they're really similar to the all tasks shortcuts folder before, where they just kind of go to specific menus and stuff. Like this one, text to speech brings up the old speech properties menu with the really old school voices. Recovery goes to this advanced recovery tools page in the control panel. Then a bunch of them are links to various troubleshooters, and then also some Windows Defender settings pages. If you're wondering why the Windows Defender ones aren't in the settings folder, that's just because that these links came from a different place. Again, I'll explain later. But these are a bit different because you'll notice these are actually subpages for the Windows Defender protocol. And where these are listed, they actually had actual names of the links associated, so these have like proper shortcut names. Now, in reality, there's way more of these deep links, around like 200 of them, and you'll see them all if you enable the Allow Duplicate Deep Links option. However, for a vast majority of these, they are exactly the same as a task link in the All Task Links folder. So by default, I just had it not include those that are already in the other folder. But again, there's the option if you want to use it. All right, finally, we can take a look at the hidden app links folder. As you can see with the link target column, these are like the URL protocols links, except that these are for actual specific paths for those protocols. The reason I call them hidden is because these aren't pulled from a standardized location. What the script does is goes into the install directory for each app with an associated protocol and literally does a brute force search through all the files, even the binaries, to find instances of these links that are using the protocol appearing in those files. Now, that means that most of these are not documented, and there are some that are oddly specific, like this MS Xbox game link that links to a specific product ID, which happens to open up a store page for Gears of War 4, because somewhere in some file, that string is hard-coded. Maybe it's in a menu or a message, something like that. But at least it still tells you that it is possible to make such a link, so they still work as examples. And interestingly, there's actually a lot more Windows Defender links than we saw before. Though just be careful because these two reboot ones, they actually just immediately reboot the computer without warning. So you don't necessarily want to go just clicking all these to see what they do. Maybe kind of read it first. Now, where exactly do these links all come from then, if they're not in the registry? Well, as for the task links, it actually turns out that they come from a resource file in the Windows installation directory called shell32.dll.mun. And if you open this up with a tool for viewing DLL resources, then you can see that there is an XML resource in there with all this data. However, this script will actually export this so you can view it, and that'll create these two files we can look at. When you open it up, you'll see that this @shell32.dll thing everywhere, which are actually string references to various strings throughout the registry. So what you can do instead is open up the other XML file that's automatically created, which has the resolved versions of the data, which basically means it's like takes those strings and shows what it's actually referencing. And again, the cool thing here is that these will all be in your local language. So that's the point of the reference. So no matter what language you're using, it's like universal. Anyway, we can now see that in this XML data, it literally lists out all the tasks. And for many of them, it, again, gives the actual command needed to run it. And the commands for these can vary wildly. They basically are just a bunch of various launch options for built-in tools spread throughout Windows. It's not like it's some centralized thing. Others, you'll notice, don't have a command listed, but instead give a reference to the control panel and also have a page. And that just means that you launch it with control.exe in Windows and then use the page as an argument. So the script handles all that. You'll also notice that these all have keywords listed, which makes it possible to actually search for stuff in that God mode folder. That's what that column is for. So what I did was, for all the shortcuts for the tasks, I put the keywords in the description or the comment box in the properties. So these should still be actually searchable if you wanted using the keywords in the folder. Though apparently these shortcuts have a hard limit of 260 characters for the description. So I had to kind of cut off some of them, but most of them, all the keywords should be usable. Also, interestingly, if you look, you'll see a lot of these have a condition property, which actually reveals why not all of these show up when you look at the all tasks menu, because some of them have special conditions for when it shows. Like this shortcut, connect to the internet, only shows if there's the condition is connected to the internet. And also invert is true, so like the opposite. Basically, this one only shows if there's no internet. Or this other one, change what closing the lid does, has the condition is mobile PC. And the ones that talk about the pen has the condition is pen available. Pretty self-explanatory. That does not explain all of them, however, because there's a few that don't seem to have conditions. Like this add a language one has no condition, and yet it still didn't show. And this adjust clear type text is also not included, despite having no condition, and also calibrate display color. Though I did notice that these don't have a category associated with them. So maybe the all tasks menu is hard-coded to not handle tasks that don't have a category. And you can see on this Windows article what the different categories and IDs correspond to. So now you can see why, depending on your version of Windows, you're gonna see different links. It's because this .mun file is updated just like any other Windows file, and as far as I know, this thing is like hand edited by Microsoft employees. And just so you know, that also means that there are conceivably tasks that exist but might not actually be listed in here by Microsoft, like if they chose not to include it for some reason. For example, on my virtual machine, which is on the Windows Insider developer channel, that one actually has a task called train computer to recognize your voice, which is not in the Shell 32 task list on my main computer running the newer 24H2, though the command still does work. For the deep links, these are sort of similar to the task links. The deep links are also stored in XML somewhere, but it's a lot easier to access than that. If you go into C, Windows Immersive Control Panel /settings, you'll see a couple XML files that are pretty similar in what they have inside. And again, this has localized strings, so we'll look at the resolved version that the script creates. And then you can see that there are these properties for many entries called deep link, which are basically just commands. And then elsewhere in each entry, it has info about what that's for, and then that's where I got these from. As for the system settings URLs, these don't seem to be documented within Windows itself anywhere. Microsoft does have a page listing all these, but again, I wanted to get it from within Windows itself, and fortunately there is a way to do that. And that is that they are embedded in systemsettings.dll as strings. And conveniently, they're stored as the full string. So I literally could just search for a pattern of like MS settings and then whatever comes after that, and then basically just filter for those. Now, comparing it to what actually shows up in the article, it seems to be all of them and more, like this MS settings advanced apps thing, which is not listed anywhere. And literally, if you Google it, there's 4 results. So I wouldn't be surprised if this is how other people found it too, those few people. As for the hidden links, I touched on this before, but it's really similar to the system settings URLs. The script basically just looks up in the registry which app is associated with each protocol, and then searches program files, the folder that it believes is the installation path for those instances of those URLs being used. Now, as for these CSV spreadsheet files, these just contain a bunch of the info that was collected while the script was running. There's going to be one for each of the folder types, and most of it won't be very useful, but it might come in handy if you want to have a list of all the names of the shortcuts and the commands that you can just copy all at once if you want. It's all in there. So now why don't we go over the launch options and stuff that you saw in the GUI earlier. And by the way, all of these are also available as arguments if you use this in the command line mode. The output location stuff is pretty self-explanatory, and this checkbox just makes it so the script doesn't clear out any previous folders if they already exist, like it does by default. The control outputs section is similar. There's 8 output folders with different shortcuts and 8 checkboxes to control which of them get created, including the statistics folder. And then this other section has a variety of various options. Don't group tasks. What this one does is makes it so in the all task links shortcuts, they don't have the category name at the beginning. So it'll all be just alphabetical like this. Alternative category names applies to all task links, and it just makes it so it uses a different source for the category names. So you'll just notice the thing in front of it might be a bit different. Include third-party app protocols. I already explained what that was. Collect extra URL protocol info. This basically just makes it so in the CSV spreadsheet file, it resolves those reference names for the app and description. I made this optional because it takes a few seconds longer and it doesn't affect these shortcuts in any way, so I figured make it optional. Allow duplicate deep links. I also already explained what that is. And deeper scan for hidden links. This is for the hidden app links shortcuts. And basically by default for certain programs that are not installed as packages, which I'm not going to get into in Windows. For those, it's only going to search for the string for the protocol within the main exe for the program. But if you enable this option, it will go and try and search through all the files of the entire installation path of that program. So it'll be more thorough, but take a lot longer. I'll also mention there are a small number of advanced parameters that are only for running the script in command line mode, but you can read about those in the comments at the top of the script. Basically, they just let you specify certain custom resource files, like if you wanted to maybe get the task links from a version of shell32.dll that was copied from another computer, that sort of thing. So that pretty much covers it. I would be very interested to know what you guys think, and let me know if I missed anything. I don't think I missed any types of shortcuts, but I guess I'll have to update it if I did. And of course, because I did waste so much time, please give the video a big giant thumbs up for the YouTube algorithm if you did enjoy it. And if you want to keep watching, the next video I'd recommend is where I talked about Windows link files, the shortcuts. There's more to it than you think, and I actually mentioned an earlier version of the script in that one, but this one's way more powerful. I'll put that link right there and click on. So thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.